The signal from nowhere. The discovery happened on a Tuesday, which Commander Elena Voss would later think was absurdly mundane for something that would change humanity forever. She floated in the observation deck of the research station Galileo 7, her coffee bulb hovering beside her as she reviewed the overnight sensor logs. Outside the reinforced viewports, Jupiter's swirling storms painted the darkness with bands of amber and cream. "Commander, you need to see this." The voice belonged to Dr. Samir Okonkwo, the station's lead astrophysicist. His tone carried that particular blend of confusion and excitement that made Elena's pulse quicken. She pushed off toward the communications hub, her magnetic boots clicking onto the deck plating as she entered the gravity section. Samir stood before a holographic display, his dark fingers dancing through layers of data that looked like frozen lightning. "We picked up a transmission," he said without preamble. "Artificial. Structured. Definitely not natural phenomena." Elena felt her breath catch. "Source. That's the interesting part." Samir expanded the display, and a three-dimensional star map bloomed between them. A pulsing red marker sat far beyond the outer rim of explored space. Approximately 47 light-years from Earth. System designation KX 1147. "We've never sent anything out there. No probes, no missions, nothing. Could it be equipment malfunction? Interference from Jupiter's magnetosphere?" Samir shook his head, his expression grave. "I ran every diagnostic 3 times. Commander, this signal has been broadcasting for at least 6 months. We're only picking it up now because we just upgraded our deep space array." He pulled up a waveform analysis. "It's repeating on a 47-hour cycle. Mathematical sequences, prime numbers, chemical compositions. The universal language." Elena stared at the data, her mind racing through protocols and implications. First contact procedures existed, of course, buried in manuals that everyone assumed would never be needed. Not in their lifetime. Not when humanity had barely colonized its own solar system. "There's more," Samir continued, his voice dropping. "I isolated one section that repeated more frequently than the others. It took me 4 hours, but I managed a rough translation using the mathematical key embedded in the signal itself." He pressed a key, and text appeared in the air between them. "Creators dying. Children lost. Help." The words hung there, simple and devastating. Elena felt the weight of them settle over the observation deck like a physical thing. "How long would it take to get there?" she asked quietly. "With our current fastest ships. 47 years at 0.98 light speed. Assuming we could build something that fast, which we can't. Our best colony ship, the Exodus, tops out at 0.35. That would make it a 130-year journey. No one would survive it. Not without cryo-technology we haven't perfected yet." Samir crossed his arms, his expression thoughtful. "But Commander, that's not the real question, is it?" Elena met his eyes. "What is?" "The real question is, who sent this, and why are they asking humans for help?" Over the next 72 hours, Galileo 7 transformed into a hub of feverish activity. Elena transmitted the findings back to Earth, where they triggered a cascade of responses from every major space agency and government. The United Earth Coalition convened an emergency session. Religious leaders issued statements. Scientists argued in academic journals and social media feeds alike. But it was Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the station's xenolinguist, who made the next breakthrough. Elena found her in the linguistics lab, surrounded by holographic fragments of the alien message. Yuki's eyes were red-rimmed from lack of sleep, but they burned with intensity. "It's not just a distress call," Yuki said, gesturing Elena closer. "Look at the structure. They're not asking for immediate rescue. They're asking for something else." She highlighted a section of the transmission, and the mathematical patterns resolved into something Elena could almost read. "They're sending blueprints," Yuki continued. "Schematics for technology. A propulsion system that could make the journey in months instead of decades. Energy generation that would make our fusion reactors look like candles. Medical technology, agricultural systems, environmental controls. Elena felt her stomach tighten. They're giving us the tools to reach them. Yes. But there's something else. Yuki pulled up another section, and her expression darkened. This part repeats every cycle, right after the plea for help. It translates roughly to, we gave life. We shaped worlds. We built civilizations. Now we fall. If you can hear this, you are ready. If you come, you will understand why we chose you. Chose us? Elena repeated. What does that mean? I don't know. But Commander, there's one more thing. Yuki's hands trembled slightly as she isolated a final segment. This message isn't being broadcast randomly into space. The signal is directional. Focused. It's being sent specifically toward Sol System. Toward Earth. The implications crashed over Elena like a wave. This wasn't a bottle tossed into a cosmic ocean, a desperate cry hoping someone, anyone, might hear. This was deliberate. Targeted. Someone out there knew humanity existed. Had known for a very long time. They've been watching us, Elena whispered. Yuki nodded slowly. The question is, for how long? Outside the viewport, Jupiter continued its eternal rotation, indifferent to the revelation unfolding in its shadow. Somewhere in the darkness beyond, 47 light-years away, someone was dying. Someone who claimed to have shaped civilizations. Someone who had chosen humanity for reasons no one yet understood. And they were asking for help. The architect's legacy. The World Congress met in Geneva 3 weeks after the signal's confirmation. Elena Voss watched from Galileo 7 as the most powerful people on Earth gathered in the hemisphere chamber, their faces projected on screens that wrapped around the station's briefing room. She'd been summoned to testify virtually, her presence too valuable at the source of the discovery to justify the journey home. Commander Voss, began Secretary General Chen, her voice crisp despite the transmission delay. Your report suggests these beings, whoever they are, possess technology centuries beyond our current capabilities. How certain are we that this isn't a sophisticated hoax? Elena chose her words carefully. Madam Secretary, we verified the signal's origin through 3 independent deep space arrays. The mathematics alone demonstrates knowledge of physics we're only beginning to theorize. The energy signature required to broadcast this message across 47 light-years is beyond anything humanity could produce. If it's a hoax, it's being perpetrated by someone with capabilities that make the question of authenticity somewhat academic. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Admiral Kovac of the United Defense Coalition leaned forward. Let's address the elephant in the room. They claim they gave life and shaped civilizations. Commander, are we discussing our creators? The question hung in the air, heavy with theological implications. Elena saw faces in the assembly ranging from fascinated to horrified. We're discussing a species with technology that could certainly terraform planets and potentially seed them with life, Elena replied diplomatically. Whether that extends to Earth, we have no evidence yet. But Dr. Tanaka has made additional progress on the translation that might shed light on this. She nodded to Yuki, who appeared on a secondary screen. The xenolinguist looked even more exhausted than before, but her eyes held a fierce determination. The signal contains what I can only describe as a historical record, Yuki began. Compressed data packets that, when decoded, tell a story. The beings call themselves the architects. They claim to have existed for millions of years, spreading through the galaxy, identifying worlds with potential for complex life. Their purpose, she paused, as if struggling with the translation, was to create what they call, inheritor species. Civilizations that could carry forward consciousness and knowledge after they were gone. How many? Someone asked from the assembly. The data is fragmented, but at least 47 distinct civilizations across the galaxy. Each one seeded, monitored, and guided through critical developmental stages. Each one allowed to evolve independently, but given subtle pushes at crucial moments. Elena watched the implications register on faces around the world. Representative Okafor from the African Union stood. Dr. Tanaka, are you suggesting that human evolution was directed? That every achievement of our species was orchestrated? No, Yuki said firmly. The record is clear on this. The architects viewed themselves as gardeners, not engineers. They created conditions for life, then stepped back. They're adamant that each inheritor species must develop its own culture, its own solutions, its own path. Interference was minimal, removal of extinction-level threats, adjustment of planetary conditions, nothing more. They consider this the sacred law of inheritance. Then why reveal themselves now? Chen asked. Yuki's expression darkened. Because they're dying. All of them. And they need help before the end. The briefing room on Galileo 7 fell silent as Yuki pulled up new data. Elena had seen this part already, but it still sent chills down her spine. 6,000 years ago, by their reckoning, the architects encountered something, Yuki continued. The translation calls it the silent collapse. A degradation at the cellular level, affecting only their species. It's not a disease, it's closer to a programmed obsolescence. Their bodies are failing. Their minds are fragmenting. They have perhaps a century left, maybe less. Can't they fix it with their advanced technology? Admiral Kovac demanded. They've tried for millennia. The collapse seems to be tied to their fundamental biology in ways they don't fully understand. Or, Yuki hesitated, and this is speculation based on some cryptic passages, they believe it might be intentional. A safeguard built into their species by whoever created them. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. The architects had creators too. The chain stretched back further than anyone had imagined. Dr. Okonkwo spoke up from beside Elena. The blueprints they've sent aren't just for propulsion and life support. They include detailed biological data. Genetic sequences, protein folding patterns, neural architecture maps. They're hoping one of their inheritor species might see something they missed. A fresh perspective on their condition. You're saying they want us to cure them, Chen said slowly. I'm saying they're desperate enough to ask, Samir replied. And in exchange, they're offering to hand over the keys to the galaxy. The technology in those blueprints would transform human civilization overnight. Faster than light travel, fusion power that actually works, medical advances that could eliminate disease, agricultural systems that could end hunger. It's all there, freely given. Elena watched the politicians and military leaders exchange glances. The temptation was obvious, written on every face. Who would turn down such power? There's a catch, Elena said quietly, and the room turned to her. There's always a catch. They mentioned something in the transmission called the inheritor's burden. Dr. Tanaka is still working on the full translation, but the essence is clear. If we accept this technology and journey to their world, we're accepting responsibility for whatever comes after. We become caretakers of their legacy. Guardians of knowledge that's billions of years old. And, she paused, meeting Secretary General Chen's eyes through the screen, we'd be making this choice not just for ourselves, but for every inheritor species out there. How many others received this message? Chen asked. Unknown, Yuki answered. But based on the data, at least 46 other civilizations exist out there, all at various stages of development. Some might be more advanced than us. Some might be less. The architects seeded them all, and presumably sent them all similar messages. So this is a race, Admiral Kovac said grimly. Whoever gets there first gains access to technology that could dominate the galaxy. Or, Elena countered, it's a test. A final lesson from teachers to students. Do we approach this with cooperation or competition? Do we see inheritor species as siblings or rivals? The debate raged for hours. Religious leaders argued about humanity's place in creation. Scientists demanded time to verify every piece of data. Military strategists worried about alien threats and interstellar warfare. Economists tried to calculate the cost of building a ship capable of the journey. But in the end, it came down to a simple truth that Secretary General Chen articulated in her closing remarks: we cannot ignore this. If we do nothing, and another species claims this knowledge first, we've chosen our future anyway. At least this way, we choose it actively. The vote was close, but it passed. The United Earth Coalition authorized Project Inheritance. Humanity would build a ship using the architect's blueprints. They would send a crew to KX 1147. And they would try to save their creators, if that's what the architects truly were. Elena stayed on Galileo 7 for 3 more days, coordinating data transfers to Earth and answering endless technical questions. On her last night before rotating home, she floated in the observation deck alone, staring at the stars. "You look troubled," Samir said, joining her at the viewport. "I keep thinking about what they said." "You are ready." "Ready for what?" "We still fight wars over resources. We still struggle with inequality. We've barely made it past our own moon. What makes them think we're ready for this?" Samir was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe they're not judging our readiness by what we've achieved. Maybe they're judging it by our willingness to try. To reach out. To help, even when the cost is astronomical and the outcome uncertain." Elena turned to him, seeing her own uncertainty reflected in his face. "Or maybe," he continued softly, "they're simply desperate enough to hope." The departure. 18 months after the signal's discovery, the ship hung in high Earth orbit like a promise made manifest. They called her Prometheus, after the Greek titan who stole fire from the gods to give to humanity. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. This time, the gods were offering the fire freely, if only humanity proved worthy of carrying it. Captain Marcus Rivera stood on the observation platform of Lunar Construction Facility Alpha, watching the final assembly crews swarm over the ship's hull like industrious insects. Even from this distance, Prometheus was breathtaking. She measured nearly 2 kilometers long, her hull a seamless blend of human engineering and architect design. The propulsion system alone had required 17 breakthrough discoveries in theoretical physics. "She's beautiful," said Dr. Elena Voss, floating up beside him. She'd been promoted to chief science officer for the mission, and the weight of responsibility had carved new lines around her eyes. "She's terrifying," Marcus replied honestly. "We're trusting our lives to technology we barely understand, built from blueprints we can't fully verify, to travel farther than any human has ever gone." "Second thoughts, Captain?" Marcus smiled wryly. "Constant ones. But I keep coming back to the same conclusion: if not us, then who? If not now, then when?" The crew of Prometheus numbered 300 souls: scientists, engineers, medical staff, linguists, cultural specialists, and enough military personnel to handle any conceivable threat. Marcus had spent 6 months reviewing applications, conducting interviews, and making impossible choices. For every person selected, 50 had been rejected. Everyone wanted to be part of history. Dr. Yuki Tanaka approached them, her tablet glowing with the latest translation work. "Captain, I've finished decoding the navigation protocols. There's something you need to see." They gathered in the facility's briefing room, where Yuki projected a 3-dimensional map of the journey ahead. A glowing line traced from Earth to KX 1147, but it wasn't the straight path Marcus had expected. "The architect's navigation system includes waypoints," Yuki explained. 5 of them, spread across the journey. Each one appears to be a monitoring station they established millions of years ago. The propulsion system is designed to require brief stops at each location, something about the physics of their faster-than-light drive. "We can't skip them." "What's at these stations?" Elena asked. "Unknown. But each waypoint corresponds to a specific lesson in the data packets. The architects called them gates of understanding. We're supposed to learn something at each one before we can continue. Marcus frowned. This journey is already going to take 14 months with their technology. How long will these stops add? Each waypoint requires a 12-hour stop minimum for the drive to recalibrate. But Captain, Yuki's expression grew serious, I don't think the stops are about the ship. I think they're about us. The architects designed this as a journey of preparation. They want us to be ready for what we'll find when we arrive. 3 weeks later, Prometheus departed Earth orbit. Marcus stood on the bridge, surrounded by holographic displays and the quiet efficiency of his crew. Through the main viewport, Earth hung like a blue jewel against the velvet darkness, clouds swirling over oceans that had birthed humanity millions of years ago. He thought about the billions of people down there, watching, hoping, praying. The weight of their expectations pressed on his shoulders like a physical thing. All stations report ready, announced Commander Sarah Chen, his first officer. Propulsion system charged. Navigation locked. We're green across the board. Marcus took a deep breath. History pivoted on moments like this, moments when everything could change or end in spectacular failure. He thought about the architects, dying somewhere in the darkness ahead. He thought about the 46 other inheritor species that might also be racing toward KX 1147. He thought about humanity's long, bloody, beautiful journey from caves to starships. Take us out, Commander. Let's go meet our makers. The propulsion system engaged with a sound like singing crystal. Space itself seemed to fold around Prometheus, and the stars began to streak past in ways that human eyes had never witnessed before. Earth vanished behind them in seconds. The sun became just another star in the cosmic tapestry. They were traveling at velocities that made Einstein's theories look like suggestions. The first waypoint appeared after 3 months of travel. It materialized on the sensors as a structure the size of a small moon, floating in the empty space between stars. As Prometheus approached, the crew gathered on the bridge to witness something no human had ever seen, architecture built by alien hands. The station was impossible to describe adequately. It seemed to shift and flow even while remaining solid, its surfaces covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. Colors existed there that human eyes weren't designed to perceive, visible only as a sort of visual echo at the edge of perception. Scans are coming back confused, reported Lieutenant Zhao from the sensor station. The material composition keeps changing. Or maybe the sensors are just inadequate. I'm reading elements that shouldn't exist outside laboratory conditions, arranged in structures that violate about 12 laws of physics. Receiving a transmission from the station, announced Communications Officer Patel. Audio and visual. It's addressing us by name. The main screen flickered, and a holographic figure appeared. It resembled the architects as depicted in their historical records, vaguely humanoid but wrong in subtle ways, as if someone had described a person to an artist who'd never seen one. The figure's proportions shifted slightly, never quite settling into a fixed form. "Welcome, children of Earth," the figure said, its voice carrying harmonics that made Marcus's bones ache. "You have accepted the inheritance and begun the journey. This is the first gate, understanding of scale." The hologram gestured, and suddenly the bridge was no longer the bridge. Marcus found himself floating in space, no, not space, but some sort of immersive projection. Around him, galaxies bloomed and died. Stars were born in nurseries of gas and dust, lived their brief, bright lives, and collapsed into darkness. Time accelerated to impossible speeds. "You come from a small world orbiting an average star," the architect's voice continued, resonating from everywhere and nowhere. "Your entire history, from the first spark of consciousness to this moment, spans less than one galactic rotation. To you, this seems vast. To us, it is the blink of an eye." The projection shifted, zooming out further and further until galaxies themselves became motes of dust in an infinite ocean. Marcus felt his sense of self beginning to dissolve in the face of such vastness. We architects have existed for 4,000 galactic rotations. We have watched civilizations rise and fall like waves on a shore. We have seen beauty and horror beyond your capacity to imagine. And we have learned one truth above all others: scale changes everything. The projection zoomed back in, focusing on Earth. Marcus watched his homeworld spinning peacefully, unaware of the drama unfolding in the void. When you think in terms of decades, you build differently than when you think in terms of millennia. When your perspective encompasses millions of years, problems that seem insurmountable become merely temporary. Conflicts that feel eternal are revealed as momentary discord. The hologram turned to face Marcus directly, and he felt the weight of attention from something impossibly old. This is why we created inheritors. Not because we needed servants or children in our image, but because consciousness is precious. Knowledge must survive beyond any single species. The universe itself is young, barely begun. What wonders might exist 1 trillion years from now, when the last stars burn out and new forms of existence emerge? We will not see them. But perhaps our inheritors, or their inheritors, or those who come after them, perhaps they will. The projection faded, and Marcus found himself back on the bridge. His crew looked shaken, their faces pale and wondering. 12 hours had passed in what felt like minutes. The drive is recalibrated, Chen reported quietly. We can proceed to the second waypoint. Marcus nodded slowly, still processing what he'd witnessed. Understanding of scale. The first lesson. He wondered what the other 4 gates would teach them, and whether they would emerge from this journey as the same people who had begun it. Take us forward, Commander, he said. Let's see what else our ancestors want to teach us. Prometheus engaged her drives and leaped back into the impossible speeds between stars. Behind them, the ancient station continued its eternal vigil, waiting for the next inheritors to arrive and learn the first truth of the universe, that everything they knew was infinitesimally small, and that was somehow both terrifying and beautiful.